Okay. Hello, third hour. Good morning. I'm Miss Burdick. I'm an English teacher here at Fremd, and I am excited to introduce our speaker this hour. But we do have to do thank yous, and I know you guys hear this a lot, but it just is really important that we thank. So much goes on behind the scenes to make Writers Week work, and we really need to make sure that people who deserve credit for that get that credit. So first of all, we're going to always start with people near and dear to my heart, the tech crew up there. So if we can give a hand out for tech crew. And Mrs. Klingner and Mr. Crash, who run Tech Crew, really appreciate what they do, so yes, to them as well. If your parents are boosters, you need to go home and hug them. It'll freak your parents out, it'll be okay though. But hug them because we cannot do this without the support from the boosters. So go home and hug your booster parents, that would be great too. Some other things we need to thank. You all need to, right now, applaud yourselves and thank yourselves. So let's do that. Because you guys help you guys make Writers Week work. We wouldn't do this if you guys weren't interested in what goes on, if you guys weren't wonderful, attentive audiences. So I know I appreciate the fact that Fremd students love Writers Week because I love Writers Week. So I thank you guys for that because otherwise it wouldn't be happening. So, and then last but certainly not least, I always like to give a shout out. Without these two people working behind the scenes all year long, this would never happen. So Mrs. Ank and Mr. Anderson, woohoo, thank you very, very much. Okay, our speaker this morning, I'm very excited to introduce to you guys Adib Karam. He obviously is an author. He's also a graphic designer, a tea enthusiast, who also apparently makes amazing macaroni and cheese. He did not bring that for us today, though. It's okay. I know. I'm a little sad about that. So, and he is visiting us from Kansas City, Missouri. His book that he's going to talk about a lot today, up on the screen there, Darius the Great is Not Okay. It just recently won a very prestigious award, the 2019 Morris Award, which is given, I wrote this down so I got it right. It honors a book published by a first-time author who is writing for teens. So that's very exciting that that just happened. And then he was named one of the best YA authors of 2018 by a lot of places. Time Magazine, Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, BuzzFeed, and Amazon, and many others. So he had a really good year last year, and this year it's continuing. It's awesome. So if you're interested in a copy of Darius after the end of the period, we do have copies up here for sale that you are more than happy to come up and meet Adib and buy a copy of the book. It's $18. So please help me in welcoming Adib.
Hi, thanks all for having me. This is a really awesome program, and I wish we'd had something like this when I was in high school. So I hope you all appreciate this and carry it forward. I'm going to start off by reading a little bit from my book because last period I forgot to and was reminded. So this time I'm going to start with there. Also, for those who don't know, Darius the Great is Not Okay is about a teenage Iranian-American boy named Darius Kellner who travels to Iran to visit his family there for the first time. So, I'm going to read from chapter 2. I had been riding my bike from Chapel Hill High School to the Tea Haven at the shops at Fairview Court ever since I got the job. It was easier than getting a ride from either of my parents. But when I got to the bike rack, my bicycle was gone. Upon closer inspection, that was not technically true. Only part of my bike was gone. The frame was there, but the wheels were missing. The bike slumped against the post, held on by my lock. The seat was missing too, and whoever had taken it had left some sort of blue blob in its place. Well, it was not a blue blob. It was a pair of blue rubber testicles. I had never seen blue rubber testicles before, but I knew right away where they had come from. Like I said, there was no zero-tolerance policy toward bullying at the shops at Fairview Court. There was one toward stealing, but apparently that didn't cover bicycle seats. My backpack sagged on my shoulders. I had to call my dad. Darius, is everything okay? Dad always said that. Not, hi, Darius, but, is everything okay? Hey, can you come pick me up from work? Did something happen? It was humiliating telling my father about the blue rubber testicles, especially because I knew he would laugh. Really? You mean like truck nuts? What are truck nuts? People hook them onto the hitch of their truck so it looks like the truck has testicles. The back of my neck prickled. In the course of our phone call, my father and I had used the word testicles more than was healthy for any father-son relationship. Thank you. Well, now we've all heard the word testicles too many times for this early in the morning. But I'm going to talk to you all today about kind of my writing journey, and that sounds really self-important when I say it. But why do I write? Why do any of us write? Is anyone in the audience a writer? Does anyone write for fun, for profit? Any fan fiction writers out there? Fan fiction counts as writing, y'all, and as reading, so I give great appreciation. Fun fact, I invented fan fiction back in 6th grade, so you all are welcome. Why do I write? Writing is the cheapest form of therapy. Who said it? Me? Maybe? I don't know. I feel it's important to attribute your sources. So I attributed this one to myself because it sounds like the kind of thing that I would say. I first started writing when I was in the 6th grade. I wrote a Lord of the Rings fan fiction. It was about 10 pages long, which I was convinced was long enough to be published as a novel. And I showed it to my 6th grade English teacher. And she said, "Wow, this is really interesting. Have you thought about writing something original instead?" Which I thought was a very a nice blend of shade and encouragement. Because at least she didn't tell me it sucked and I shouldn't try writing. And I'm very glad about that, because it's, I don't know, like 6th grade is really hard, and it's really easy to have your dreams crushed when you're in 6th grade. When I was in 7th grade, my school district passed a bond to buy a bunch of new computers, and so they had to do something with all the old computers. And so they stuck them in a lab and told us we could go and write on them. And that's literally all we could do. They didn't even run Windows. They were pre-Windows. None of you were alive when these computers were manufactured. I might not have actually been alive when the computers were manufactured. I mean, they were really old. They had black monitors that only produced orange text on them. There was quite an aesthetic going on. But we got to go and write on them to our heart's content. And so me and my friends would stay after school for like an hour and a half on Tuesdays and Thursdays and write stories. And were they more original? Kind of. Instead of just fan fiction, they were self-insertion fan fiction. So I also invented self-insertion fanfics. You're welcome, again. But from then, I kind of stuck with writing purely for pleasure. Through high school and college, I actually studied technical theater. Shout out to all the awesome techies who made this all work. It's very rare that I'll go to a place and plug in and everything is ready, and so it was really nice, like a welcome surprise. So applause for the tech people, please. Yeah, yes. But all throughout that, I was still kind of writing for pleasure. And then, when I was in college, the Lord of the Rings films came out. Has anyone seen Lord of the Rings movies? All right, yeah, I hear some clapping. So I obsessed with them. I loved them. I thought they were absolute genius. I actually really liked the book, Lord of the Rings, before, and so the movies I really enjoyed as well. And after seeing them, I was convinced that I was destined to be a filmmaker. So I went to film school and found out I did not want to be a filmmaker. Anyone ever done that? Like, worked really hard to do a thing and then find out that it sucks? Okay, yeah, I know, right? It's hard. But the one part of film school I really liked was my screenwriting class. So I thought, I'm not meant to make films. I'm meant to be a screenwriter. So I tried writing screenplays, and it turns out I also wasn't meant to be a screenwriter. But I still liked writing, it was really fulfilling. And meanwhile, I moved home after school and got a job in tech theater for a company in Kansas City, and I would just write in my spare time. And after writing a couple bad screenplays that went nowhere, I thought, well, maybe I should try writing a novel. And indeed I did. And I wrote one novel, and then I wrote a bunch more novels, and they were all very bad, hiding under the trunk. But eventually we landed at Darius, The Great Is Not Okay, which was apparently good enough to get published. And even good enough to get in BuzzFeed, which is like a personal victory for me. Does anyone else I don't know, I'm obsessed with BuzzFeed. I take quizzes every day. Anyone else? Okay. Do y'all know that there's someone who's making $1 million of revenue for BuzzFeed got like a gift card of thanks because it was some teenager in Michigan making quizzes. I don't know, it's a weird article. You should read it. It's fascinating. But that all circles back to what I said here, that writing is the cheapest form of therapy for me. And what I think I was grappling with is that when I was growing up, I didn't really get to see myself in books. When I was in 9th grade, we had to read several books for assigned reading. We had to read The Odyssey and The Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Moby Dick. And we also had to read like my least favorite book in the entire world. I feel like the animations are a little delayed. That's embarrassing. I should probably check my timings at some point. Has anyone ever read A Separate Piece? Has anyone ever pushed like a friend out of a tree? Okay, someone said yes. Okay, you might be the only person in the audience that can relate to this book. I certainly couldn't. It was about like rich white kids at a boarding school who got jealous of each other and pushed each other out of trees. You know, The Odyssey is about coming home from war and going in search and having all sorts of misadventures. Moby Dick, I've never I wouldn't spear a whale. Whales are endangered. As far as Rime of the Ancient Mariner, I mean, I've only once before worn an albatross around my neck, and it was for a party. So, you know, I didn't see myself. These are all about, you know, rich straight white boys or white men, and I couldn't connect. I didn't see any value and any way to relate them to what I was experiencing in the world, especially when I was a teenager. I had very fraught high school years, as probably many of us do. And actually kind of made me hate reading for a while. Does anyone have books in here that they just like loathe? All right, does anyone want to shout? Yeah. Beowulf, okay. Ooh, okay. Of Mice and Men? Really, okay. Okay. Oh no. We have some really strong opinions. Okay, we're gonna bring it down. We're bringing it down. And this is not to throw any of your teachers under the bus, because you have some really awesome teachers who help like put this program together. But I think, you know, a lot of teachers grapple with, you know, combining love of reading with a state-mandated curriculum, and it's a real struggle. And it's also, you know, people who, you know, shout books they don't like. There's probably, for every book that's not liked by someone in here, that same book is probably loathed by someone else. And, you know, I don't mean to shame anyone who does, in fact, like A Separate Piece or Moby Dick. I heard someone say Fahrenheit 451 is something they don't like. That's actually one of my favorites. But I completely get why you don't like it, and it's totally cool. Like we all don't have to like the same things. So I don't mean to shame anyone for any reason. But it's really hard when like everything that you read in school is something you can't connect with. And it's kind of hard because after a while you start to feel like if you yourself don't have a place in literature, then maybe you don't have a place in the world. But as I got to you know, writing for myself, I also started doing a lot more reading for myself and reading books for young people, because that's what I ended up accidentally writing. And I come across some really great books that I connected with and saw myself in, and I thought were really beautiful. And yeah, they're all super queer. Some of them even have Iranians in them, like If You Could Be Mine. I think that was the first book I ever read with an Iranian character in it that wasn't a terrorist or like the weird neighbor that no one gets. And that book was published in 2013. So I had gone that far in my life without seeing myself on the page. And there's kind of a weird and subtle erasure that happens when you don't get to see yourself in media. Because like the first 4 books I all wrote, and they're in a trunk under my bed, they all starred straight white boys, which I'm obviously not one of. And I had like... That was extremely well timed. That's a mood if I've ever heard one. But when I found these books, and it was, you know, in the last 5 years that I started reading books like this, you know, reading ended up being a form of therapy for me as well, because I got to see characters that were like the teenager I was on the page. And I got to feel like I existed. And that was a pretty phenomenal thing, because it felt like these books were all talking to me, both me as I was when I read them, and also me as I was when I was a teenager and needed them and didn't have them. Has anyone ever felt like that kind of connection with a book? Is anyone willing to share? You don't have to, it's kind of personal. But if anyone has something. Did I hear a book name? No? It's okay if you don't want to share, but I'm glad to know that some of you have had that feeling. It's a really powerful feeling to have. So how did that affect my writing? This is another very famous quote from myself. Stories let us write about things that are too big to talk about, and it's not really that famous. And it's also not really mine. I kind of paraphrased from something that one of my theater professors said when I was in college. But I think it kind of strikes at the truth that when something's bothering us, sometimes making art about it can help us express it in a way we otherwise can't. And all the stories I've written have started with a question I had about the world or a problem that was bothering me that I couldn't solve. Stories grappled with things that I couldn't grapple with any other way. In the case of Darius, The Great Is Not Okay, it meant questions about what it meant for me to grow up with depression, which was particularly severe during my high school years, and has thankfully gotten less severe, but I still deal with it every day. Or what it means to be the child of diaspora. My father came from Iran to the United States in the 1970s. My mom is like white Missouri mix. And like what it meant to navigate those cultures. Some of my books have been rage at our current political system, or the way we tend to put boys and masculine folks into cages and tell them that it's wrong to express their feelings or to have feelings in the first place. Some of the other books that are trunked novels are dealing with my feelings about war, or about my sister's illness, or all kinds of things. But I was always trying to understand my own feelings and then see if I could connect with anyone else that felt the same way. Which leads me to another quote by someone who is famous, and I didn't say this. It's from a Nobel laureate, which I'm given to understand is a big deal. And he says, "In the end, stories are about one person saying to another, 'This is the way it feels to me. Can you understand what I'm saying? Does it also feel this way to you?'" And for me, writing stories was a really great expressive tool that let me connect with other people. It let me connect with people who live with depression, or other children of diaspora, or sometimes people who miss their family, whether they're separated by death or whether they're just separated by distance. People who just wanted to know that it's okay to feel the things they feel. Some of my favorite interactions I've had have been people that, young people like yourselves who read the book and appreciate that Darius thinks of things that no one ever gets to say aloud when they're a teenager, about how kind of ridiculously ironic it is to be a teenager, where you're caught in this place where everyone treats you like children and then expects you to respond like adults. Does anyone ever feel like that? I always felt like that when I was in high school. Did someone say mood? Thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, for me, stories were really about connecting with people. And I think stories are a great way for all of us to connect with people. This is part of a larger quote by Redeem Sims Bishop, who is a great scholar. And it's something that a lot of us who write for young people talk about amongst ourselves and keep in mind as we work. And I hope you'll forgive me, I'm just going to read the whole thing. Books are sometimes windows, offering views of worlds that may be real or imagined, familiar or strange. These windows are also sliding glass doors, and readers have only to walk through in imagination to become part of whatever world has been created and recreated by the author. When lighting conditions are just right, however, a window can also be a mirror. Literature transforms human experience and reflects it back to us. And in that reflection, we can see our own lives and experiences as part of the larger human experience. Reading then becomes a means of self-affirmation, and readers often seek their mirrors in books. Has anyone ever picked up a book and read about someone completely different from them, but understood what it was like to be them? Does anyone ever have that feeling? Have that window into a life? Has anyone ever picked up a book that kind of perfectly reflected their own experience? That was kind of a mirror into them. Yeah. That's what we're trying to do, and especially for those of us that aren't straight white men, it's kind of a more urgent thing, because for so long every book was a window into the straight white male experience, and often the straight white rich male experience of people who throw their friends out of trees. So that's something that a lot of us frequently focus on, and something we all still try to grapple with how to get in our work. Similarly, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie gives a really great TED Talk about the danger of a single story, and kind of my favorite line from it is where she says, "The single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story." One story I fought against, especially being in high school right around the September 11th attacks, was the idea that everyone from the Middle East was a terrorist. That's probably kind of the easiest to think of stereotype I fought, and I've fought lots of them in my life, and I'm sure lots of you have fought against those stories that people have written for you as well, and understood that they're not the whole story. Sometimes they're not even a real story at all. And that's something that is important to me as I write as well. That's what drives me to do the work I do. And that leads me into We Need Diverse Books, which is a really awesome organization. Has anyone heard of this before? I can't tell. The house lights are very dark. Is anyone raising their hands? I'm going to assume that some people have, but that others haven't, and I'll proceed with my explanation accordingly. Ooh, house lights, thank you. We Need Diverse Books was founded back in 2014 by Ellen O and Daniel Clayton and a group of other authors who looked at the state of literature for young people and said, as I've mentioned before, oh, these are all rich, straight, white dudes. Actually, that's not technically true, because I think the one exception I always think of is To Kill a Mockingbird, which is obviously written by a straight white woman, and also not a personal favorite of mine. But I know like a lot of people really love To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't see it. That's fine. Everything's fine. But they started this grassroots organization that has been working to get better and more representative literature. Of those 4 books I showed earlier that I really connected with, most of them are the result of this push to get more windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors into the world of children's literature. Just last year, we had like a kind of a bumper crop of really great books. Does anyone really like fantasy in here? Did someone say, what is fantasy? Or did I mishear? Fantasy is books that take place in a world that is not our own, in which there are various unexplained forces that occur. That's probably a really good... Actually, no, that's probably a really simplistic definition. I don't really write fantasy, so I bet a fantasy writer could give you a way better definition. But Black Wings Beating was one of my favorite fantasies last year. It's about a twin brother and sister who live in a world where falconry is like commerce and warfare, and they have to capture what's called a ghost eagle, which is like the most powerful falcon in the world, to appease a warlord that's kidnapped the brother's boyfriend. It's super like rich, luscious world building. Does anyone in here like science fiction? Okay, I hear some woos. Excellent. Seafire was probably one of my favorite science fictions of last year. Has anyone seen Mad Max Fury Road? Okay, Seafire is basically Mad Max Fury Road on the high seas. It's about a group of female pirates who take on a despotic warlord who kidnapped all their brothers and enslaved them with a violent psychotropic drug. It's so good. It makes me... Does anyone ever read a book and they're like mad at how good it is? Because you're like, how dare you? How dare you be so talented? That's how I feel about Seafire. Does anyone just like reading contemporary books? So Odd One Out. I actually just finished it a couple days ago. And it's by Nick Stone. Has anyone read Dear Martin? Okay. And I think Nick was actually here last year, I heard. I love her so much. How dare she? She's super awesome. I don't know, did any of you get to hear her speak? She's a really great speaker. But this book is about a group of friends kind of navigating their own sexual identities and friendship and attraction to each other. And it's kind of amazing to me to think that books like these are on shelves and that young people get to find them now. And it kind of makes me jealous and a little sad that I didn't get to have any of these when I was growing up. And there's even more coming out this year. These are all books that I'm super excited for. One is called I Wish You All the Best. It's about a non-binary teen that comes out to their parents and gets kicked out of the house and has to kind of put their life back together living with their sister, and finding kind of a newfound family and friends and love. And it's super cute and sweet. One is called Technically You Started It. It's a mistaken identity romantic comedy that takes place entirely over text messages between a nerdy demisexual girl and a rich bougie bisexual boy from Minnesota. And it's so funny. They make fun of Canada so much. It's hilarious. I don't know if anyone here ever makes fun of Canada. It's like one of my favorite pastimes. It's delightful. And then A Place for Wolves is a really awesome historical thriller about two boys trying to escape war-torn Kosovo during the outbreak of ethnic violence there back in the 90s. It amazes me that these are all going to be on shelves and available, and hopefully let all of you see yourselves in books in one way or another in ways that I didn't get to until much more recently. And that's pretty sweet. And with that, I think I'm done, and I hope you all have questions, because otherwise I'm going to be standing here with crickets chirping, and it's going to be awkward for all of us. So thank you. I saw someone already has a question. Thank you for not leaving me here by myself. Yes. Have I ever read which book? Oh, Lord of the Flies. I had that book on my shelf for like 10 years and I never read it. And finally, after watching Tidying Up with Marie Kondo, I thanked it and let it go. Why? Have you read it? Do you like it? Okay. Okay. How did you feel about it? Okay. I accept that. Good to know. I'm going to be honest, I'm probably still not going to read it either. I trust your review. Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
What are your thoughts on Hamlet?
What are my thoughts on Hamlet? Are you all doing like a Hamlet unit right now?
Yeah.
Okay, that explains it. Really? Okay. What I find fascinating about Shakespeare in general is that, from our vantage point now, we all look at him as like classic literature, but in his own time, he was seen as kind of poppy and like trashy. And so I think it's fascinating how much we revere him. I think that he has a lot of merit, and I feel like I actually did enjoy Hamlet. I spent a lot of, like a whole year in college studying Hamlet. But I also feel like it's not for everyone. And I try not to shame people who don't like it. I do think it can, there are parts of it that are really easy to identify with and a little more universal, especially the kind of ubiquitousness of the to be or not to be speech, because it's really great soliloquy and on self-examination. But I feel like sometimes you have to dig through a lot of the text otherwise to get to like the few meaty nuggets. So it can be challenging at times. So yeah, I feel like if you don't like it, you should totally just own not liking it, and it's totally okay. Yes, in the white shirt.
Do you ever find that it's really hard to write a book if you make it long enough to be a book, like description?
Okay. Do I ever find it hard to write like a full-length book? That's actually, when I was younger, I did, and then when I was older and first started writing, I tended to make books that were too long. Because I was very impressed with myself, and I was like, I'm going to be a writer, and I would just overwrite everything to death. And so I had to learn to kind of pare back and edit. And as far as do you mean like the discipline to do it, or just kind of in general?
Yeah, there's just so much description. How do you think, if I was writing about a bike, I'd be like, someone took my bike.
Okay. For me, I tend to write very character-driven books, and I tend to write from the point of view of the character, so I always try to ask myself, what would the character be feeling and thinking? And I try to just be as honest as I can. And I don't know about any of you, but I have lots of random thoughts all the time. So I sometimes just put some of those random thoughts on the page and then figure out which ones serve the story best. And a lot of that just comes with practice. I mean, I wrote a lot of very bad books that will never see the light of day to kind of get where I am now. So, yeah, honing your craft, that can work too. Yeah. Ooh, yes.
What's your favorite type of tea?
My favorite type of tea? Ooh, right now I'm really obsessed with Longjing or Dragonwell, which is a green tea from China. Yes, it's fantastic. Any other questions? Oh, yes, question. Would I ever consider showing like my old crappy books? This is actually, someone in the last period asked that too. So I guess maybe, I'll have to think about it. There are a few that I think might one day become a real book, and so I probably wouldn't share those, but I'll have to go and look and see if there's anything. I think the problem, especially in a format like this, is like it takes a while to read anything aloud, and it can get hard to read on a screen, and so I always worry that it'll kind of bring the presentation to a screeching halt, but I don't know. I'll have to see if there's a good way to do that and incorporate it, because it seems like there's a lot of interest. Because yeah, like my stuff was bad. Like bad. Yes. In the gray.
Okay, a separate piece, is that the one where they like climb the tree, like jump into the water, and then he pushes his friend down the... It was awful.
Yes, it was awful. It's not a spoiler on the cover. There's someone falling out of a tree. Yes. And did I see someone like on far fringes here? Or no, we'll just move back in here. In the blue. Oh, we'll just go the lighter blue and then the darker blue. And then I think there's someone in shadow. We'll go to you, number 3. We'll just make a sweep. Okay.
So you said you used to write fan fiction. What was your favorite fan fiction that you wrote for yourself?
Okay. I don't know that I ever finished any fan fiction other than that very first one, the Lord of the Rings one. The one that I thought was the most brilliant was a Kingdom Hearts fan fiction that I wrote. And it incorporated... Has anyone ever heard of Chrono Trigger? It was like my favorite game for the Super Nintendo. So it was like, took place in that world, and Darkwing Duck and Launchpad McQuack were like the sidekicks. I was really, really proud of that whole concept. Okay, thank you. Thank you, America. Yes. And then we had, in the dark blue, did I drink a lot of chai as a kid? Yes. Quite a lot. Yes. And then in the shadow.
So as someone who tried to be an author about a year ago and gave up and is thinking about coming back, what's an answer to something like motivation to keep writing that you were saying?
What's a motivation to keep writing? I don't know. For me, it was really about kind of a deep personal need, and I'm very selfish in a way that I was purely just writing books that I wish I'd had as a young person. But I think it's so personal that everyone has to find what their own drive is. But I think also, like, when you figure out what that drive is, it's going to kind of open up the world of writing for you in a way that you might not have had before, because you'll understand why you're doing what you're doing, and that'll hopefully give you more energy to do it. Yeah. Are there any questions in either of these sections? I feel like we were over here for a really long time. Yes, in the red.
Why did you choose to read the chapter of the book that, like, as opposed to different chapters?
Why did I start my reading? Because the word testicles is objectively funny, and especially because we're like, I don't know, like we still haven't even had lunch yet. Like everyone's energy, like just is kind of morning low energy, and I felt like something funny about testicles would make people laugh and like me. Like, right. Thank you. Thank you. I take it worked. Excellent. Yes. I hear some shouting. Yes. Okay. Right. I'm very confused. Okay, we'll go over here and then we'll eventually make our way back here. Okay, yes. Someone in the back. I feel like there's someone in shadow. What life experiences did I use in Darius the Great is not okay. Growing up, as I said, my dad is from Iran, but I grew up in Kansas City, and his siblings and parents eventually moved from Iran to Vancouver, British Columbia, and I would go and see them every summer, and be there for 3 weeks, and then go home. And it was really wonderful to be part of this huge family, and it was really hard to say goodbye to them over and over. And so a big part of Darius was me trying to kind of distill that feeling of connecting and then saying goodbye over and over. Also, I also really, really like tea, and Darius really likes tea, and so I kind of use that. And a lot of his experience with depression is kind of directly inspired by my own dealing with that when I was growing up. So there's probably lots of other things and probably some embarrassing things as well. But those are kind of the big ones I can think of right now. Right. And did I see another hand in the corner, or no? Otherwise we're going to come back to Blue Hoodie over here. Yes?
What's your favorite type of cereal?
Ancient Grains granola. That's my favorite type of cereal. Yes. And a gray hoodie. Have you ever seen truck nuts before? Oh, I'm from Missouri. Yes. They're ubiquitous. Yes.
I have a question. Sorry. Okay, so you say you were a graphic designer, right?
Yes.
So what do you do specifically? Do you design the cover of your book, or what else do you do?
So the company I work for as a graphic designer is an audio, video, and lighting kind of full-fledged production company, and we have a lot of corporate clients in and around Kansas City. And a lot of what I end up doing is fixing their PowerPoints for them, because apparently PowerPoint is a skill that will get you very far in life. As far as designing stuff for my own book, I didn't have any role in that. Author for any traditionally published book that comes out from one of the publishing houses in New York, authors generally don't have any control over the design of either the cover or the interior. They only have control over the words. So there's a cover designer at Penguin who actually is also Iranian American, and she actually stole working on the book from another colleague. She's like, nope, I'm doing it instead. And then she found an illustrator out of Brazil to illustrate the cover and did a really fantastic job. She's way more skilled than I am. Yeah, so I do occasionally design motion graphics for corporate events and stuff as well. I don't know, I do a little bit of everything. It's hard being the only person who knows how to use a computer at your job. Yes. Anyone else? I see someone in the back in the shadows.
I was just wondering, you talked a little bit about your own struggles with depression growing up. What kind of advice would you have for students who are maybe experiencing that right now?
What advice would I have for people living with depression? For me, it really kind of varies, because I feel like depression can take a lot of different forms for a lot of different people. I think it's important to kind of understand the breadth of experience that can have, and I think it's important to find a support network that will help you deal with it, whether that's doctors, whether that's friends or families. I think it's important to find people that aren't going to shame you for it, because there is still a stigma around it, and we're slowly seeing a shift. But I still have friends whose parents don't get at all why they're depressed. And I think my advice is actually more for people who see people around them living with depression. And advice would be to keep reaching out, because when you're depressed, you sometimes feel bad for asking for help, or even worse, for accepting help. And so learning how to listen and learning how to be there for people is a really great skill to have. I hope that helps some. Okay, I'm getting the thumbs up. I think that means it went over well. Do I see a hand, or is it a stretch? I see a hand. Blue hoodie.
What do you put in your mac and cheese?
So first of all, it's 1 pound of pasta to 2.5 pounds of cheese. Obviously, I start with the bechamel sauce. I also feel it's really important to use a nice, not just like a basic elbow, but like a cavatappi, something that will have lots of capacity for sauce carrying. The sauce, this is going to shock you. I actually do use Velveeta in it as well because I feel like it helps thicken the sauce really nicely. It's important the sauce to be al dente because when you're going to bake it. And in addition, my trick is to take 1.5 pounds of 3 different cheeses, usually a smoky one, a sharp one, and a creamy one, and cube them, and mix them in while they're still whole cubes into the pasta, then pour the sauce over and bake it. Is that the bell, or am I getting a standing ovation for the mac and cheese? Excellent. Yeah, thank you all. I'll be here all week. That's a lie. I won't be here all week.